The Soul of Detroit.
Witness for the prosecution. The most electrifying entertainment of our time. The stunning climax to a half-century of
Podcasting.
suspense. The setting is
Drew's basement.
the story, two people in love. A murder and a trial, climaxed by the 10 most breath-stopping minutes you've ever lived.
You asked interrogative questions around my face. It's gone.
What are you doing? Come on.
That is not paid for by them. That is paid for by the people of Detroit.
You might be qualified, ML.
I'm not qualified for this job.
Let me tell you something. You want to go right now? Okay? You want to go right now, Albert?
Hey kids, it's your old pal ML Eric, and the two people in love, if I may dare say so, are this podcast and our audience. We love you guys, and we're not afraid to say it. We proudly
Are you in pandering? That's
put
a
our
nice
feelings.
love affair.
And I'm trying to boost our numbers. I think there's, sometimes you gotta put your heart out there, man.
Well, you're not doing it through humor, so that's nice.
Wow, clearly the two people in love are not me and Mark Fellhauer,
I love you very much.
our co-pilot and
Good to see you again.
and
Good
producer.
to see this guy.
We have a great show, and not just because Sean Windsor isn't with us. He'll be back next week. That's fair warning. He is at a Pistons press conference where they're going to announce something about a bad team that maybe won't be so bad, but probably will be anyway. So get that somewhere else. We're not going to waste your time with that. But we have two fantastic guests. We're joined in studio by Michael Bullotta, a former federal prosecutor who is now a defense attorney who's been keeping an eye on the Whitmer Kidnap Conspiracy Plot trial. And we're joined on Zoom by Darren Beattie, the founder and editor of Revolver News. Darren can only be with us till 12:30, so we're gonna give a shout out to our sponsor and let Darren talk a little bit about what he thinks was really going on with this supposed plot to kidnap Michigan's governor, which made national headlines not just when it happened, but when the verdict came down last week. If you missed it, two of the defendants were found not guilty. Two of the defendants were found not innocent, but not guilty, and they may be facing a retrial. So we're going to touch on that in just a minute. But first, we want to thank the people who make it possible for us to be here, and that starts first and foremost with our premier sponsor, Mr. David Hall and Hall Financial.
Yeah, call Hall Financial, 866-CALL-HALL. Sign up for a free 5-minute mortgage review, and you can have a chance to win Drew's tickets, by the way, to a certain event that I legally cannot say what it is, but it's Drew's tickets. It'll be well worth it. And while you're there, you get that mortgage review, see how you can get money out of your house. You can unlock tens of thousands of dollars. So 866-CALL-HALL, register to win now for those. And I believe they're still doing covering the cost of your appraisal too. So
yeah, that's a significant
terrible
benefit.
read I did there.
Thousands of 5-star reviews, including 2 from me. So call Hall Financial. You can link to their website from our website, which is mlsoulofdetroit.com. And just for those who may be a little squeamish, this sporting event is not a cockfight. It is what some people believe to be America's pastime, and it's not the NFL. So get in that drawing. Do you go with Maz to that, or do you get all the tickets?
You do. Maz will be there, unfortunately.
So every
most importantly,
every
get
cloud
money.
has a lead lining. In this
Yeah.
case, it's Mazaway, and
Get
that
money
means
out of your house.
You got to get to the buffet first, because I think he's a
will
tough guy to
assault it,
follow.
yeah.
Yeah, there's not much left on the tray after Maz hits it. We are also brought to you by Luke Nowacki and Pinnacle Wealth Services.
Yeah, 248-663-4748. He's going to provide rational financial advice right now. The market's all over the place. Stocks, bonds, which way do you want to be? What does the yield curve mean? I mean, everyone's going to be talking about that. Your 401k, how's it going to be allocated? Get advice, get a strategy. Luke's the guy to do that. Luke Nowacki at Pinnacle Wealth, 248-663-4748.
Because Luke will make it all about you, sweetheart.
Securities and investment advisory services offered through Royal Alliance Associates Inc., member FINRA SIPC. Royal Alliance Associates Inc. is separately owned, and other entities and/or marketing names, products, or services referenced here are independent of Royal Alliance Associates Inc.
That's Luke Nowacki, Pinnacle Wealth Strategies. You can find a link to his website from our website. But if you call these guys, make sure you let them know that you found out about them from our show. And, of course, we're also sponsored by the Caju Cafe, the pride of the East Side. We'll tell you a little bit more during Room Simmons 609 about the great acts coming to the Caju this week. But live music there most nights, great food every night. To find out more, go to cajucafe.com. So, Michael, we want to say hello. Thanks for coming back in the studio.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you. And a special thank you to Darren, who's coming on the show on very short notice to talk about a major case. So, Darren, we really appreciate you making the time. Let's jump right in. Tell us a little bit about what you think was really going on when this handful of guys got together and started talking about grabbing Michigan's governor, maybe killing her, maybe killing some police. And according to some of the surreptitious recordings made that were played in court, they were hoping to start a revolution.
Yes, well, I think this case, and particularly this verdict, is a rare occasion for justice, if not optimism, because optimism would presuppose some kind of accountability for the Justice Department, which clearly screwed up here big time. And the question is, what's the agenda behind this screw up? Just to set the table for a little bit, for those in your audience who might not know the basics of this case, this was presented as this grand domestic terror event. It was splattered all over the media shortly before a major presidential election. And the dominant narrative was, this shows that Trump supporters are the new domestic terrorists. And you had organizations like the Department of Homeland Security come out and reinforce this narrative, saying white supremacy and white supremacist domestic terrorism is the number one national security threat. Well, there are a number of fishy things about this case from the beginning. One shocking statistic: of the 26 people originally imputed to this so-called kidnapping plot, 12 turned out to have been either informants or undercover agents. In fact, the involvement of the feds in this case in setting up what they alleged to be the conspiracy was so egregious, and the participants are so sordid. Just to give you a few examples, one of the FBI agents running this was actually arrested in the course of the trial because he beat the hell out of his wife on the way back from a swingers club. Mm-hmm. Another one of the lead agents was prohibited from testifying because he is actually moonlighting his own private security firm, which he promoted with a pseudonymous Twitter account, leaking out various details of the Michigan case, presumably unbeknownst to the FBI. Another one of their main informants in this case, a decades-long informant who had every financial incentive in the world to set this thing up, he was actually arrested. The government arrested their own informant on a gun charge and actually effectively shut him up from testifying on behalf of the defense in trial. And so there are a lot of weird things going on here. It's a rare glimpse into the kind of sordid personalities within law enforcement who conduct these kind of sham entrapment operations. But there's a larger context here, and that's why Revolver News is originally interested in this case, which is that there are extraordinary and striking parallels between this Fed-infiltrated fake kidnapping operation in Michigan and the January 6th so-called insurrection. So even though most people talk about the kidnapping plot in terms of kidnapping, it actually also involved a plot to storm the Michigan State Capitol. Interesting parallel with January 6th. Many of the so-called plotters were involved with a militia group called the 3 Percenters, one of the 3 main militia groups imputed to the most insurrection-y type activity on January 6th. And as a cherry on top, which is a remarkable connection that Revolver.News reported months and months and months ago, the head of the Detroit FBI field office, who oversaw this joke, embarrassment, sham of an entrapment operation, just days after these so-called plotters were arrested, FBI Director Christopher Wray promoted D'Antuono to the DC FBI field office, where he went on to oversee the January 6th investigations. So the reason that this Michigan case was originally interesting and relevant to me is I'm not from Michigan or anything, and otherwise wouldn't have been extremely relevant. But the parallels with January 6th, suggesting contextually that January 6th could also have been a similar type of government setup in order to further a political agenda. That's, I think, the most relevant thing about this case that extends far beyond the state borders of lovely Michigan.
And Darren, you raise a lot of points that we've raised on this show before, specifically some of the problems with the government's men. I'll call them that, even though the government ended up saying that one of the people who was working for them was also working with the conspirators, and he was playing both sides, and Sean Connery, where I am, but it was pretty wild. The amazing thing about this, though, is jurors heard none of that and still reached a verdict of not guilty not guilty for two of the defendants, one of whom admitted to having a short-barreled rifle, which on the face of it should have been a conviction right there, because he said, I've been charged with this and I did it. I mean, he didn't say it that explicitly, but there was no dispute on that case. So clearly the jurors didn't like something that they heard coming from this. But one of the things, whether this was concocted by the government or not, is that these men on trial clearly came together to do something, clearly built explosive devices, practiced breaching techniques, surveilled the governor's house, and discussed of their own free will that they wanted to kill people and they wanted to set off a revolution. Now, if somebody comes into my studio and says, hey, ML, let's go knock over a bank. I got the car running. I got the ski masks. I got the guns. All you have to do is hand this note over to the teller. If I say that sounds good to me, aren't I at some point culpable for my own actions, whether or not somebody's tried to tee me up or not?
You asking me?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying that it seems to me that whether the government said, hey, let's go get this biatch, if I say I'm in, there's some part of that I have to bear some responsibility for, right?
Right. No, that's a great question.
Or perhaps not. I don't know.
It's a great question. It's a fair question to ask. I am not a lawyer, and so I can't really speak to the minutia pertaining to what constitutes entrapment, technically, what doesn't constitute entrapment. And I don't know whether that was on the jury's minds, because as you pointed out, a lot of the evidence that would have pointed in the direction of entrapment, a lot of this, the jury was actually prohibited from hearing. But I certainly think that when you have a situation where 12 out of the 26 people originally associated with this kidnapping plot were either undercover agents or informants, that's a hell of an infiltration ratio. And when you look at the actual people involved, I don't want to be disparaging anyway, but these are not necessarily masterminds who could have constituted any kind of threat to the United States government. The original reporting on one of the individuals, I think one that was neither found guilty or not guilty, who lived in a basement of a vacuum repair shop with no running water or anything. The reporting on this originally, in order to drum up this larger narrative of domestic terrorism, was that, they met in this secret terrorist bunker. This wasn't a secret terrorist bunker. The guy was so destitute and impecunious that he lived in the basement of a vacuum repair shop without a running toilet, and that's where they talked about these things. And so you really do have to, aside from the technical legal point of what constitutes entrapment, I think we have to interrogate this issue on the broader contextual level, because this wasn't just some little local story. This was something that had 12 out of 26 people who were feds involved in this story. The national narrative was used to support a specific political narrative at a very politically relevant time in our country, just a month before a major presidential election.
Darren, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I feel like I have to jump in because you said you're not a lawyer. I happen to be a lawyer, and I spent 23 years at the Department of Justice. And one point of yours I agree with, one point I adamantly disagree with. And the part I don't agree with is the connecting of dots and the timing of the Whitmer case coinciding with the presidential election. I know for a fact because I've done cases and I've seen how cases go through, even high-profile cases, and there is not any kind of organized strategy to affect elections that happens in the Department of Justice. In fact, I did public corruption cases for most of my time in the United States Attorney's Office here in Detroit, and we specifically tried not to interfere with elections, and we were faced with the timing issue over and over again. So I don't believe that happened, and I don't believe that the assistant United States attorneys that tried the case and that investigated the case were part of some broader plan to affect the elections. The case was brought when it was brought because it was the time to bring the case. That is not to say that political folks didn't use the case for political reasons. But let me just tell you about the part that I do agree with you on, and that is that these guys who were basically yahoos that loved blowing stuff up and they loved getting guns and they thought it was cool and they wanted to case the governor's vacation house. I'm sure they got so many jollies out of that. Not only that, they were experiencing a catharsis of all of their angst and anger towards the government at a time where Michigan was shutting down for the pandemic, and they directed that anger towards Governor Whitmer. And I think there are more fundamental reasons why the case ended up the way it has, and I think we'll get to that in a little bit.
One of the things that I find troubling with these cases is, and I think Michael will give us some perspective a little later on the internal decision making, is when do you pull the plug? And I think, Darren, if I understand where you're coming from, you would say the issue wasn't did the feds jump too soon. Your issue is the feds actually got the ball rolling in the first place. And that this was part, are you saying, but here's the part that I want to try and see if I understand correctly. Are you saying that the former head of the Detroit field office got this conspiracy going in Michigan and then went to Washington to get the January 6th insurrection underway as well? Because that feels like a couple of pretty big leaps to me, but I want to hear you work us through that.
Right. Well, look, Revolver News, my news organization, gained national prominence for calling into question the dominant narrative pertaining to January 6th, noting that there's pretty compelling evidence that there's some degree of federal involvement in the militia groups imputed to the January 6th insurrection. And I think the context for that argument, it's certainly an interesting coincidence that you have the Michigan case, which, as I pointed out, involves one of the same key militia groups imputed to January 6th. It involved not only a kidnapping plot, but a go into Michigan state capitol plot. And the guy who oversaw this operation, which I think it's overly generous to say that it's suspicious. I mean, the malfeasance and the misconduct and the sordid behavior of these disgraced federal agents is simply a matter of record at this point when it comes to this case. And so the individual that oversaw this deeply politicized case was just days after these arrests in October promoted to the highly coveted DC field office to oversee the January 6th investigations. I think that's interesting contextually in light of the striking parallels between the Michigan case and January 6th, and in light of the independent, compelling evidence suggesting that there was a degree of federal involvement in January 6th itself.
Darren, let me just say this about government.
Hold on, Mike, before you get to that, I just want to clear up some definitions, because to me, I don't think it's beyond. And I don't know that this man was in charge of Detroit and was in charge of Washington. I don't doubt that. So let's just stipulate that happened. But the fact that he was in one place at one time and in another place at another time is interesting. It could be a coincidence, but I haven't heard any proof that he was involved in some plotting. I mean, to say that it's suspicious, you don't quite have me at suspicious, because you got a guy who was in Detroit 1 month and in Washington later, and something happened over a long period of time in Michigan, and then something happened in Washington. I mean, what factual basis do you have to accuse this person of basically being probably one of the best deep cover ops ever? And it's been my experience, frankly, with the federal government, that if they're trying to plan a conspiracy, it usually falls apart pretty fast, because they don't usually, no offense, Michael, have their shit together as much as Hollywood would have us believe.
Yeah, I mean, if you could let me just quickly answer that, sure. I don't think it was a mastermind. As you can see, the whole the whole sordid affair in Michigan fell together, and it looked exactly how you'd expect it to look if people, these federal types with the IQs that you would expect for federal agents, were conducting a kind of politicized conspiracy. It fell apart spectacularly, despite all of the resources they had in the Department of Justice, despite nearly unanimous cover throughout the organs of the regime media, and despite multiple largely successful efforts to prevent the jury from even hearing half of the details of how the feds screwed up at best. And so I'm not really ascribing any kind of special intelligence to this individual named Stephen D'Antuono. I think he's probably just a reliable dumb henchman of the sort that they depend on to conduct these kinds of operations. I don't think it's dispositive in its own right that merely days after this arrests in this failed Michigan entrapment operation, he shuttled over to D.C. to oversee the investigation in another major so-called insurrection event with striking multiple parallels to what happened in Michigan. I'm not hinging everything on the fact that this individual who oversaw Michigan went to January 6th. I'm just suggesting that contextually, it's certainly an interesting coincidence to consider in light of the constellation of additional compelling evidence suggesting malfeasance, not only in January 6th, but clearly in the Michigan case.
So I think we're agreed on the coincidence word. I think you put a lot more behind it, but I would just suggest that this guy had all the time in the world to put together a conspiracy in Michigan, picked a bunch of goofballs, and that's not my word. That's, well, I guess it is my word, but their own defense attorneys defended them by saying, these are a bunch of misfits who just like to get high and shoot guns. How could they pull this off? So he has all the time in the world to pull together a conspiracy in Michigan, utterly fails, if we're to take your point. But then, then he jets over to Washington, and in a couple months, he pulls off one of the most historic shit shows in the history of this country. Boy, he got his sea legs pretty fast once he got in the Beltway, didn't he?
No, I think you're misunderstanding my point. I'm not suggesting that he somehow masterminded anything. I'm suggesting that he is a yes man, reliable bureaucrat who is able to rubber stamp these manifestly incompetent operations, if you look at Michigan, and reliable rubber stamped low IQ people like him really are fairly typical when it comes to federal agents of that sort. So I think you're interpreting as I'm not saying that he's of special importance or some kind of mastermind. It's more of a kind of footnote contextual detail to add cherry on top of the cake of all of the striking parallels between Michigan and January 6th.
Maybe I can give you
Except in Michigan, the conspiracy didn't happen, whereas in Washington, people did storm the Capitol. I mean, that one really, whoever was involved in it, they got the result they were aiming for, if I take your point.
I think you can argue that in Michigan, they got the result they wanted too, because even though they didn't get convictions, and so in that more limited context, it was a failure. In the broader context, it was actually quite a success, because when you look at the dynamics of how these things play out, the whole point of it was to really reinforce and amplify this narrative that the number one national security threat to the country was these down and out marijuana smoking, yokels hanging out in the basement of the vacuum repair shop. That these guys, or these interesting contextualists, so-called, are the number one national security threat, insofar as the agenda was to reinforce and popularize that narrative and use the failed Michigan entrapment case as a pretext to do so. I would say it was actually quite successful. So it depends on your metric of success.
Okay.
I think insofar as they were able to use these cases to further the agenda of weaponizing the national security apparatus politically against people with a certain political perspective, I'd say both Michigan and January 6th, unfortunately, were a resounding success and will remain so until there's some accountability at the highest levels of the Justice Department.
So Darren, I know you have just a minute. Mike's champing at the bit. I'm going to let him jump in here before you go. Mike, what's...
Just wanted to say that the way these cases come to the Department of Justice, they start off on the very lowest level. There's an informant, or there's some information that comes to the local FBI, in this case in Grand Rapids, and that there's an FBI agent assigned to the case, and then they work the case. The special agent in charge there has virtually nothing to do with the case. They're not involved in investigating it. They're not involved in planning it or doing virtually anything. So to connect dots at the very highest levels in this investigation, in this case, I think ignores how cases really work. They come from the bottom up, and they're investigated by usually lifelong FBI agents or other federal agents, and they work with prosecutors that were there before President Biden was elected. Those same federal prosecutors were there for this trial, and there's no politics. It doesn't drip down to the level of federal prosecutors. I just wanted to make that point.
So, Darren, I know you're on the clock. We want to give you the last word here. What do you think of what Mike just threw out there?
Well, I'd just like to say that I really appreciate this format. I generally go on sort of more politically aligned and types of shows, so I really enjoy this back and forth. So thank you for giving me the opportunity. And I'll just conclude with and then I respect the fact that your other guest is a lawyer, but insofar as he's suggesting that the FBI itself, up to its highest levels, is not politicized, in particular for cases like this, I'd have to say that that's manifestly false and ridiculous. Anyone who's been following the FBI, particularly since the election of Donald Trump, it's clear that the FBI is a deeply politicized institution and is largely in line with the more general thrust of the American national security apparatus aligning itself politically and directing its targets against people with a certain political persuasion. It's happening in the Department of Defense. Our intelligence agencies have been complicit in this, and the FBI has been complicit in this. And the Michigan case and the January 6th case, it's not limited to that, but those are especially egregious examples, in my view, of the politicization of the process. And I think it's just untenable to say that the Michigan case or the January 6th case are not politicized at the highest levels of the FBI. And I'll just leave it at that and let the audience decide for themselves.
Well, Darren Beattie of Revolver News, thanks for taking the time. We represent all views on this show, so we appreciate you coming on. We may have you on again sometime if you're up for it, but
I'd love it.
Thanks very much. I think we could go all day with this. I know you have to go, but we're going to dive into a little bit more some of the mechanics of this trial and why this verdict may have come about. But Darren, we really appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you very much.
So that's Darren Beattie from Revolver News. The one thing that I find interesting is and I don't want to pretend I understand every part of Darren's reporting, but if this was a plot to try and affect the outcome of the election by having this go down less than a month before the election, because I think the Whitmer Kidnap plotters were snatched up in October of 2020, I'm not quite sure how having a big insurrection after the election would have helped I mean, the timing just seems a little weird, and I'm.
Well, it seems like it boils down to the fact that people view the FBI as political, and historically, I mean, look at J. Edgar Hoover and how he used the FBI for politics. It just I think that is just that's just how people view it. But, who doesn't have political leanings one way or the other?
Well, and the FBI agent whose text came out, saying we're going to get Trump or don't worry, we got this during the, in 2015, 2016, that sure as hell didn't help burnish the agency's image, nor did some of the conduct of some of these FBI agents and informants who worked on this case. And I know that the feds must have been losing their mind when some of this stuff came out. But, and so I'm not going to excuse the agents. They're professionals. They have to be professionals. But some of the other informants and other people who are involved, I don't think juries like those kind of witnesses.
No.
But I always keep coming back to, if you're going after shitbags, who do you think they're hanging out with? Not Mother Teresa. First of all, she's dead. But second of all, the kind of turds who come together, some of them flip and they don't immediately become choir boys because they decide to tell what was really going on inside the toilet bowl.
So about FBI agents, because our guest talked about that a bit. The FBI agents, they are, number one, they're human beings, okay? And it's a young man's game. There's a mandatory retirement age of 57 in the FBI. But the other thing about that is the FBI, they do a fantastic job, in my experience, investigating cases, but that's where their job ends. They don't make these decisions. They don't decide whether to bring a case. They don't decide which witnesses to call. They don't decide, that for instance, that lead case agent can't testify because of all of his problems with domestic violence and such. So the FBI has an important check on what they're doing, and that is they are, by their own regulations and policies, they are required to consult with an assistant United States attorney or a Department of Justice attorney as they progress through an investigation. So at every turn, when there's some new piece of evidence that came up in the investigation of the Whitmer plot, it was reported to a federal prosecutor. And as I pointed out, these prosecutors are not political. We were never political. I was never political. And the Kilpatrick case isn't the only case of note that I worked on that had the attention of Washington. But I can promise you that it never happened to me a single time that I felt a finger on the scales from anyone above me, apart from colleagues and the United States Attorney themselves saying this is what I think. But I was never told to prosecute someone that I didn't believe deserved it. And I don't know of anyone. And I met assistant U.S. attorneys from around the country when I taught down at the National Advocacy Center. I taught new federal prosecutors how to do trials. And when I was down there, I met any number of prosecutors from around the country, and they were all. I've never heard a story, not once, that they were pushed in a certain direction. J. Edgar Hoover aside, and the FBI aside, the Department of Justice, in my opinion, in my experience, has not experienced that politicization.
But I understand how people can feel that
absolutely,
way
Mark.
because they're appointed, right?
Yeah.
So they're appointed by the president, the U.S. attorneys. So,
but in this
that
case,
right there seems political,
right?
And then,
but in this case, everyone in the Justice Department in a leadership role at the time these things were going on were appointed by Trump.
Sure.
Yep.
So Trump put his own people in to create these conspiracies that would undermine his chances of being reelected. That's kind of where I say you can put all these things on a grid and say, here's a crossover and here's this. And this guy was, Colonel Mustard was in the drawing room with the candlestick, but it don't make Colonel Mustard the murderer. And then when you back up and say, wait a minute, so all the people who were involved in trying to undermine Trump were appointed by Trump?
Right.
That really stretches credulity.
And you can go back to the Kilpatrick case. That was done under Obama. You can go back to, the president doesn't seem to matter, at least in my experience.
Although you could argue the Obama case first got on the Fed's radar during President Bush.
Right, but he could have killed it or asked for a deal or something.
I'm just saying you can take these things back and connect them to somebody else. And, David Letterman, when he had a morning show, had this great little skit where every time there was a major disaster, they put a picture of Joe Garagiola there in his catcher's gear. And they're just like, why is it that Joe Garagiola keeps showing up at all these tragedies? I mean, that was a joke, but some of this feels like, oh my God, Joe Garagiola put Kwame Kilpatrick in prison and tried to get this guy in a vacuum cleaner basement shop stitched up for a kidnapping conspiracy.
I understand what Mark was talking about, the perception, and perception is so important, right? But the reality is, having been there during these cases, I never saw it, and I would have seen it, and I didn't.
Well, do you feel is the FBI overzealous when they do investigations by using informants? Do they rely on that too much?
This case is an aberration. Okay, and I was going to talk about what I think is the fundamental problem.
But there's a lot of similarities to the Hutari case, right?
Right. That's the other case. That
so
I think
if it
is
didn't
also
wake people up or wake the FBI up then. You really think this one does?
So back up, Michael, if you could. I just want to do a little role playing here, and we all get to keep our clothes on. You are.
Wait, hold on. It's just the three of us guys.
Yeah,
that's true.
Yeah. All right. What's my safe
No,
word?
those Sean Windsor shoulder
using it
rubs.
right now.
So you are the assistant U.S. attorney who's working with me. I am the FBI, and I come and I say, Mike, I got to tell you something. This case is rock solid. We got these guys before they did some real damage. You know, we took them as far as we could, but we think we stopped them just in time to prevent somebody from getting hurt and to give you the strongest case possible. We're ready for trial. You know, we charged them. I just testified in the preliminary examination. Got to tell you a little something before we go to trial. I kind of beat my wife's ass after she didn't dig going to a swingers party with me, but I think we're good, right? You want to go get a latte?
I'm good on the latte, and it's happened to me many times in my career as a federal prosecutor that agents were excited about their cases and they were overconfident. And that
so you don't say,
that's the
you
role
stupid mother... What are you doing? We're trying to get these guys in prison. You're beating your wife because she doesn't want to swing.
Oh, as far as that goes, yeah, I've had agents that have problems. And the biggest problem that I saw with agents is if they ever said something to a judge and the judge found that they were not truthful, that basically ruined their career. So we had agents that we said, you can investigate the case because we didn't think they were untrustworthy, just that they got caught in a situation that made them basically worthless as a witness. So I've had to do that before where I said, this witness can't testify. You know, you can look through records or you can do other things, but you're not going to hit the stand. So what I would say in that case is basically, well, first of all, the domestic violence is horrible, but you know, that is not relevant to his testimony. So a judge would never allow that in.
He was going to be the star government witness. Don't you think he was going to be the Bob Beckman of this case? And for people who don't recognize the name, Bob Beckman was the lead FBI agent in the Kwame Kilpatrick public corruption case who was on the witness stand throughout the 6-month trial because he was the expert and he was a stellar witness that jurors really liked, that prosecutors relied on, and who could speak to almost every aspect of the case.
Sadly, just retired, by the way.
Oh,
just
did he?
Retired. Fantastic career.
Oh, well.
Best agent I ever worked with.
Crooked politicians in southeastern Michigan. Yep. Happy birthday.
Exactly. Let's hope that's not the case.
Okay, so your Beckman comes in and says, I slapped this woman around because she didn't want to swap, and you don't say, you dirty...
What is your question? What would I do?
Well, I mean, I'm just saying, what would your reaction be? Would you say, oh, this, I mean, you kind of sound like be like, well, that's okay. We have problems with witnesses of some kind. We're going to try this case. There's no party would say, you son of a bitch.
No, I wouldn't do that. I would say that's a personal issue that he
has. You knucklehead?
No, I wouldn't do that.
But don't you think it changed the prosecution's course of action where they said, we can't put this guy on the witness stand?
No, I don't. Because
really?
Everything in that case was on tape. I don't think that changing that case agent made a difference. And the jury didn't hear about it. Maybe they read about it. I don't think that that's the problem with the case. I think a lot of people are overlooking the big problem with this case. And if you want, I can tell you what that is.
Yes, please.
I guess so.
And that is the fundamental flaw of charging a conspiracy in this case. And the flaw is that if you look at the
swingers,
there's that problem. The Pew Foundation research shows that of everyone who gets indicted with a federal crime, we'll start with these stats. 90% of people charged with a federal crime plead guilty. So take that 90% out of it. Then you're left with 10%. 8% the remaining defendants have the indictments dismissed for whatever reason. It could be that they need to do more investigation. Something happens with the case, it gets dismissed, and then only 2% of all people charged with a federal crime go to trial, and of those 2%, 83% are convicted. So, what is the problem with insurrection plots? We have 2 in Michigan. They both went south. What happened? And my answer to that is that prosecutors are used to charging conspiracies. Federal prosecutors, we do it all the time. I used to do it all the time, and it could be conspiracy to distribute narcotics, conspiracy to commit smash and grab bank robberies. We call those Hobbs Act robberies. Whatever the crime is, but in every single solitary one of those other cases that aren't the aberration that I'm talking about, that we're seeing with Hutari and with the Whitmer plot. Every one of those cases, there are substantive crimes charged along with the conspiracy. In other words, they actually committed the crimes. They actually sold drugs. They actually did robberies. So here, if you think about what the jury instructions are to the jury, they're saying to the jury, you can only convict these 4 men if you believe that they intended to accomplish the goal of the conspiracy. What does that mean? These guys had to really intend to kidnap the governor. And do we know, and you gave the example, ML, about someone coming up to you and saying, the car is running, let's go rob the bank. If they had waited, if the FBI had waited till that car was running in this case, they would have all been convicted. Everybody that was about to get into the car would have been convicted. The problem is they arrested the bank robbers, and to use your metaphor, while they're sitting around talking about the bank robbery, while they're, getting plans from the bank. And it's so different when you don't have the committed crime. Then the jury has to guess, were they really going to do it? Maybe a couple of the defendants were going to chicken out. Maybe a couple of the defendants didn't really intend to do it and they just enjoyed themselves. It's impossible to get in someone's mind. And that's why conspiracies, every single one that you see charged, there's always a completed crime. And if you think about murder for hire cases, for instance, what will happen is, let's say that a woman is trying to kill her husband, so she reaches out to somebody, and that person turns out to be an FBI informant, tells the FBI. What does the FBI do? Well, they have the wife pay the informant the money to commit the murder. But it doesn't stop there. They actually get the intended victim. They photograph the intended victim with some help from Hollywood, and they make it look just like they were actually killed. And they send that picture they give that picture to the wife. Here's the dead body. Give me the rest of the money. That's when they take it down. And why do they do that? Because they have to show intent. They have to show intent, and that's what they couldn't show in this case.
So
they took it down too soon.
They just ended this too soon?
They ended it too soon. They had
kind of feeds into Darren's point about it or being political because of
before the election.
Yeah,
I just want to know, when did Charles Pugh start doing research for you?
Oh my God!
Well, he had to find a job.
You waited that long for that bad of a joke?
Yeah, that was.
When he got to my analogy was a little drawn up. But so
if you were the prosecutor in this, you would have said, no, let's wait.
It's easy for me to say that in retrospect.
Sure.
So I would hope that I would say, okay, when were they going to do it? What's the plan? And if it's just, well, they're talking about it, they think it's a great idea, they love it, they went to go to
they're shooting up things, they're blowing up things, which whatever, you can do that on your own private property.
And I'm thinking, as a prosecutor, okay, right now we have them for blowing up things. If that's illegal, we have them for the short-barreled shotgun. We have them for whatever we have them for, but we don't have them for really intending to go kidnap the governor, because you got to prove it. You got to prove that they meant it.
It does seem like they were very close, though, because the 2 that were fully acquitted were the 2 that did not go on the surveillance trip that the FBI informant, I believe, drove and actually filled the car. This is his money. But the other 2 guys did go. So they felt that was strong enough to say they did have the will.
It didn't help also that their plans were so ridiculous. Like one of the defendants, I think, said that they were going to pilot the governor out into the middle of Lake Michigan and leave her there, I guess hoping that another vessel wouldn't come by. And so that's akin to...
It's a big lake.
That's like the Joker in the TV Batman. The Joker would tie up Batman and Robin and
with the sharks,
and there'd be a giant egg timer or something next to him, and the dynamic duo had a few minutes to escape. Otherwise they would be a trap door. They'd splash into a tank of hungry sharks.
So the Batmarine, the Batmobile submarine that they would summon with the
So that's similar to this. If they really wanted to hurt the governor, why didn't they just plan to go and shoot her? It just doesn't make sense.
So this brings me to a point that I've wondered about throughout the whole trial, and my understanding is these goofballs, and I'm summarizing what the defense said about their own clients over many, many days of testimony. They're charged with kidnapping, weapons of mass destruction, unregistered destructive devices. That was some of them. In the case of Daniel Harris, possessing a short-barreled rifle. And the fact that he wasn't convicted on that makes me think the jury just said, this case sucks. Get this guy out of here. You've locked him up for a year and a half. No, we're not even going to give you the one that everybody agrees he did. But I've wondered when I listened to some of the testimony and when I read some of the coverage, if I was the governor, I would have felt very, very, very uncomfortable with these people roaming the earth, talking about shit like this, buying weapons, trying to blow stuff up, practicing breaching my house. I would not have slept very well at night knowing that people who do this kind of stuff can walk around fearing no consequences whatsoever. That said, if I was on the jury, knowing that finding them guilty of kidnapping and putting them in prison for the rest of their life, boy, oh boy,
Yeah.
Was there a lesser charge that could have been brought against them where a juror might have said, I don't know if they did enough to forfeit the rest of their life, but assholes who go around saying stupid shit like this, you can cool your heels for 10 years, bro.
Yeah, if they were making the threats public, but they weren't. They were talking amongst themselves. So if they had done anything over the internet or over,
well, they used the
letter
dark web,
or anything
right?
like that, that would be a threatening communication. That's a federal crime.
Wire fraud, right? Or wire?
It would be a threatening communication over across state lines. That's a felony. So there is that. But you touched upon a good point when you put yourself in the perspective of a juror, and that is a lesson that took me a while to learn when I was a federal prosecutor. That is that you could be able to prove every element of the crime, and you could feel like you'd ace your law school test to show that look, it meets the element 1, 2, 3. It's all legal. It's perfect. But that doesn't mean anything if you don't accomplish the number one goal as a prosecutor in a trial, and that is you have to make the jury not only believe that you met the elements, but you have to make them on an emotional level, on an intuitive level, want these people that are these defendants to go to prison. And you have to assume that it could be a very long time because you have no control of that. And every judge by the law, by jury instructions, tells the jury, hey, jury, don't think about how much time this guy's going to get. You just have to see if they met the elements. And guess what? The juries, every juror that I've ever talked to, they really ignore that. And they really say to themselves, do I want to send them to prison? I learned that lesson the hard way when me and another prosecutor indicted 17 Detroit cops back in 2004. And that case went to trial. And the first batch of them, and even though we knew it was going to be very hard because it was a case where the officers were lying on their police reports about guilty people. They were basically saying that they got drugs off the people when really they broke into their houses and their apartments and stole it.
You had more stinky witnesses.
Yeah, terrible witnesses. But the point is, even though our mock jury, we had a jury consultant, we had two mock juries convict, and that didn't mean anything because the real jury.
So they were really mocking you.
The whole thing mocked me back. Fortunately, Judge Cohn, may he rest in peace. He recently passed away. Judge Avern Cohn mercifully stopped reading by count 18 when it was not guilty. He said, "Oh, the rest of them are not guilty," and then threw down the papers. But I learned a lot from that case, and fortunately, the officers were disciplined, and some of them were fired. But still, I learned that when I went back and I watched the tapes of the jurors and the mock jury, and I realized when I went back that their comments were when they were asked what should happen to these officers, they said, "Oh, they should be suspended. They should be docked some pay." Nobody said, "I hope they do a lot of time in prison," because they were making the community safer, even though they were violating everyone's rights.
Well, in that case, you had unsympathetic victims. That would be the drug dealers who got ripped off. In this case, and I know there's a lot of people who don't like Governor Whitmer, but I don't know what she's done to justify people walking around saying, I'm going to kill her, I'm going to kill a bunch of cops, I'm going to blow up this stuff, I'm going to set off the revolution, I'm going to do, this is the Boogaloo call to action. I mean...
But when was the date of that? When was that going to happen?
If you get there a day late and I'm the governor, I don't really care whether you guess right or wrong because I'm dead.
Well,
they were surveilling them.
Yeah, you got 10 informants in there, however many informants. You know what they're doing. So why don't you wait for them to actually plan to do something?
Well, so that's the other thing that I'm really curious to get your take on and that Darren brought up. And this is one thing where I think Darren and I may actually be on kind of the same wavelength. You had a bunch of people working for the federal government on this case, some of whom looked pretty sketchy and some of whom were doing more than just saying, oh, well, so you think you're going to buy some weapons? That would be, when are you going to do that? Because that would be kind of cool, I guess, where they're saying, hey, here's a card with $5,000 cash on it.
Who were you impersonating, by the way?
That was Big Dan.
That was Big
Red.
Dan. I thought it was Fox. I don't know.
No, I
haven't heard your Fox, but okay.
Yeah, here's my Fox. There's no toilet here. Why won't anybody come over and hang out with me in the basement? Because there's no toilet there. Just a coffee can that looks very suspicious, and a couple dogs.
Are you surprised that?
But I mean, sorry, Mark, we got off on a tangent. But do you think a problem
by the way?
that some of these government cooperators went too far? That they didn't just say, well, if you're going to blow something up, let me know when you're going to blow something up. Where they said something like, well, I'm free on Friday. Why don't we blow it up on Friday?
Yeah, I really don't think the entrapment defense was what caused the verdict. I think because there were two defendants that testified, two co-defendants who pled guilty and said, look, this was our idea. And you have the defendant's own words talking about doing it. So they feel bad now.
Well, that's
there's no question that they were talking about doing it. But were they really going to do it when push came to shove, when it was time to get in the car, like your analogy? The car's running. Who's getting in? And the jury couldn't figure that out.
But when you have two defendants that pled guilty, are you surprised they didn't hold more weight for the jury?
Well, one thing I'll say is I feel bad for the defense attorneys.
Sure.
That counseled those two to plead guilty.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that's what I mean. It doesn't look like such a great move now. So I was reading a headline this weekend where it said, Alaska man who threatens senators gets 32 months in prison. I thought, wait a minute, this guy just made verbal threats? How the hell did he get 32 months in prison? He pleaded guilty.
Maybe we need a new statute.
No, but I mean, he pleaded guilty, and it kind of goes to that point of, in these cases, unless you can convince somebody to plead guilty, they may walk. And I wonder
No. You're missing the fact that in that charge, it's just making the threat. You don't have to prove that you intended to follow through. You don't have to prove that you don't have to prove what they had to prove in Whitmer.
So did they overcharge him?
Yes, excellent question.
Did they overcharge him?
Yeah.
No, they charged him too soon. Okay. If they were really going to do this, they were going to make plans to do it.
So now with the Alaska case, just so for people who are following closely, I think those threats are made publicly, right?
Correct.
But in the Whitmer case, you're saying these guys never went on Facebook and said, we're going to get the gov who's with me.
Right, and they never made a threat on the governor's life using the internet.
Like they didn't send her something that said,
or in the mail. Yeah,
we're watching you.
Yeah, people are prosecuted all the time. I've represented people since I've been a defense attorney who charged with sending threatening communications through the mail. That's a real thing.
Yeah, she never would have known about this, right? Because it wasn't public,
right?
Until they were charged. Do you think it was a mistake, or would it have been? It almost feels from where I'm sitting, which is just reading news stories, that. Maybe the prosecution thought, oh, this is too easy. We have two defendants that already pled.
Yeah. And it was underanalyzed by the prosecutors. They didn't think it through as far. But in their defense, they must have had an extraordinary amount of pressure for the reasons that ML was just talking about. You got the governor of the state that they had to tell about it, and they don't want anything to happen. They don't want it. Maybe their informant oversleeps, and then
once again, that's why. So to people, and Darren would say that's why it looks political. That there's a political pressure there. And now you did point out to Darren, which I thought this was a good point, that a lot of politicians use this to their advantage and made it political. So I can see where people. Yeah, but I'm not going to connect the dots to some grand conspiracy because I don't give them that much credit.
Well, it doesn't make sense, Mark. Off. There's no way that the tail is wagging the dog. There's no way that that's happening because everything comes up, like I said, from the bottom up. It's not a plan, and folks that think that, I think, they have a lot of time to look at all the different things that happened and go back and reconstruct how they could be connected. And I think
that's the reverse engineering is where these things fall apart.
Sure.
This is where there's a bunch of people in the room and they're just in the room. And then a couple of years later, you go like, oh, wait a minute. Joe Garagiola was there.
So we haven't mentioned Richard Trask by name. That's the guy who, I don't know, is it alleged or did he?
He pled guilty.
He did plead guilty. So he did assault his wife after a swingers party. But he was the...
the swingers party was never proven.
Okay. He assaulted his wife.
Was it? I know you look quizzical.
I mean, they were only there for a minute. I didn't even know their names. We
Well,
all
you-
had
you
we
concluded that
all
was
had
the
different
cause of
name
it.
tags on.
You concluded that was the cause of the fight.
Mine was Richard Hardoni.
Impossible. But what I was
Spell it
wondering, I got the joke.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Don't get me wrong. I just didn't find it funny. He was the face of this until that came
Counting
out.
for taste.
Are you?
But what do you mean the face of it? Like,
Well, he was out there the one time. He was the
He was
FBI.
Beckman.
Oh man,
He was Dirty
that's
Beckman.
That's
But what I want to know
overrated,
is,
the face
Waddy
of it.
Beckman.
would you have had
Agents are fungible. Sorry, I said it.
Sure.
I mean, they're not all equal. No one's equal to Beckman in my
Yeah,
view.
but you had a lot of shitty agents on this. The guy who's pimping his side business, the guy who's a double agent, the informant who's like, well, let's just shoot through the window instead of shooting through the door. I'm like, good judgment call.
But in regards to the agents, are you surprised they still didn't put them on the stand?
No,
Would
because
you have put Trask on the stand? Would you have used him?
well, I could have used him because, like I was saying earlier, the fact of a domestic violence case.
yeah, the
has
judge was never going to let
absolutely nothing to do with it. If it were
So
if
why
it were a
didn't
conviction
they?
for a false statement on a loan application for a mortgage or something like that, then I would definitely not put him on. Why did they not do it? I think it's because the FBI fired him. I mean, it'd be pretty bad to put your star witness, star agent in the stand. And what is your occupation? Well, I used to be an FBI agent, but I'm fired.
Okay.
Why were you fired? Can't talk about that. Swingers Club, you know. That kind of
What about the other one? The agent that had the side business.
You can have other employment as an FBI agent. Certainly at the Department of Justice, you have to vet that with the department. You have to, like, when I was a federal prosecutor, I was teaching on the side. I was teaching in a law school, so you can do that. You just have to get permission. So I don't know if I think he didn't have permission.
And Mike was teaching a bomb making class, by the way. So.
Yeah.
It seems like the prosecution was very overconfident in this case.
There you go. They were not looking, and I think
And maybe they misunderstood the jury.
Well, right. They were looking at, hey, we have lots of evidence to show that they were serious because they did all these things. But then were they gonna really go kidnap her? I mean, that is what they can't prove.
It's one of the things to know. It's another to prove.
Right. And so going forward,
if you guess wrong, you've put somebody away potentially for life.
I understand.
I think that heavy sentence must have preyed on their minds.
Yeah.
Of course, nobody knows because the jurors haven't spoken, and because the jury was picked in a way that made it virtually impossible to go speak to them after the fact. Which
I was
really
surprised that there was a sketch
not
of the jurors.
cool.
Did you guys catch that? There was actually a sketch of the jurors.
really?
Which is very unusual.
Where you could
Usually
you could tell what their faces look like.
Yes. Yes. I mean, the not trying to slag on the artist, the courtroom sketch artist, but
They were very good.
I've seen better.
Oh, okay.
Was it better than that drawing that they
Carol
did
Cameron
of George Costanza's boss when he was on the beach?
Oh, yeah. Or
Mr. Kruger?
Or Tom Brady when Tom Brady was
Tom
in
Brady.
court. Yeah, that's a classic one.
Yeah, it's like, so Gollum was on the jury. Okay, who else?
Or that one meme of the sketch on the news of the
Leprechaun?
Is that the no, wasn't there like a stick figure or something?
Yeah, no, there was the Leprechaun down in Mobile.
So let's back up to one other question that has come up out of this, and that is, and I've touched on it a little bit, I think, with my references to the being found acquitted of the short-barreled rifle charge. Could jury nullification have been an issue here? I mean, and people have speculated that this was a Western Michigan jury with folks from Northern Michigan were going and blowing shit up and shooting guns and not really digging the governor and stuff like that, are not necessarily out of step with how a lot of folks over there feel.
Yeah, I think that definitely played a role in that. And the fact that the government was willing to charge all these folks with, and especially the two that they acquitted, with this plan to kidnap the governor when they clearly did not believe that they intended to do that, that can bleed over into other charges in the case, and they could just be saying to themselves that, why are we even here? This is a waste of time.
You mean the jury didn't believe you think the prosecutors did believe that they meant to kidnap the governor?
The prosecutors did, of course.
They did, right.
And
I want to be clear.
Right, no, I'm sorry. I'm saying that the jury didn't agree with the government. They didn't agree with the prosecutors on that, and that can bleed over to the other charges. And I think that the government misconduct to think that they don't know about it, I think is naive. The judge can instruct them all day long to not look at the internet. They knew about it. The jurors know about it. These days, you can't keep jurors from finding out stuff that's in the news. So
I assume they always know.
yeah, so you have to assume they know.
Yeah.
So the top prosecutor, the U.S. Attorney for the Western District of Michigan, a Trump appointee, has said that he wants to prosecute these two guys who, Barry Croft and Adam Fox, who were not found guilty but were not acquitted. He wants to try them again. Any predictions on whether that happens, first of all, and second of all, whether they bring different charges?
Oh, that's a good question. I think.
What would you want to do?
I would reevaluate the case, hopefully, and look at the fact that we didn't have enough to convince. Well, first of all, two of them got acquitted. I would look at the evidence against the two that got acquitted compared to the ones that didn't. That there was a hung jury to see if they're really that different. You know?
Well, the one thing is the two who got acquitted were not at some of these.
They didn't make the trip.
Some of the surveillance stuff. Yeah, they didn't
That's
go on the road
thing. They didn't go on the surveillance trip.
So that would be the difference. I probably would try to work out a plea deal. Honestly, I don't think I'd want to try it again. No one likes trying a case again. That's the worst thing. Even on either side.
It's like knowing the game plan.
Yeah, you have to go through everything again, and it was grueling. I would not want to do that. I'd want to work out a plea deal.
So what do you offer them? Spitting on the sidewalk? Time served? I mean, they've done 18 months. So whatever you think about whether these guys were guilty or innocent, they've all done 18 months in prison already, which would be a drag to get. I mean, it's great to get acquitted, but to say, shit, I knew I wasn't guilty and I did 18 months in federal prison or county lockup, that sucks.
Yeah, I would definitely try to dispose of the case. But if you're the defense attorney, are you really going to advise your clients to take a felony conviction? I mean, I don't think they're going to get a deal. I think they might have to try it again, but I don't think that they're going to have any better luck the second time because cases don't usually get better. Witnesses have already testified. There's more inconsistent statements. There's not going to be any new evidence that helps the government, most likely. The people that got acquitted are not going to come in and now be your witnesses. So there's really, I think it's just going to get worse for the government from here.
And do the two guys who already cut plea deals, can they say the second time around, I'm not going to testify this time. I've changed my mind.
They have to honor their cooperation agreement. I don't believe they've been sentenced yet. Right.
So they're still
in the
for
hook.
A little mercy.
Yeah. Okay. So they've already pled guilty. They can't likely withdraw their guilty pleas. If I were their attorney, I probably would try to do that because there's a provision to allow guilty pleas to be withdrawn for a fair and just reason. I'm not sure that this verdict qualifies as that fair and just reason, but I certainly would try to do that because we saw what happened with the jury, and there's a fundamental problem with the case, and there really is, and that is just the proof on intent. It's just not. I don't think it's strong enough to be beyond a reasonable doubt, and to get 12 people, and it's hard enough to get 2 people to agree on what movie to go see. You're going to get 12 people to agree on a life sentence potentially. It's very hard.
Could they? Because there's some state charges, right, for the other guys.
Yeah, that's always an option. Mark is to punt the case to the state and say,
that's the
don't talk about that case. Don't talk about Leland. I know you're going to.
That's the Leland corollary.
No, but that's always an
option. He was sentenced to eating sushi after being involved
in
with
you. That's even worse.
Well, I was going to say, he was sentenced to being interrupted while eating sushi.
Right.
No, he interrupted me. I was going to leave him in peace with his mom.
It's always about you.
Yeah.
So do you think they'll do that then? Punt it back to the state because the state charges are totally different.
Yeah, that's a possibility, Mark. But I if I had to guess, I'm going to say that
they'll just let it go.
Well, no, I think that there's going to be a lot of political pressure. I think the U.S. Attorney probably will go forward.
See, there you go.
That's why people. Can you imagine being a local prosecutor saying, "Hey, you want to take this loser case off our hands?" No, I don't. No, I don't.
When I say political pressure, I should, given our last guest, I really should qualify that. When I say that, I just mean optics. Optics are important to the. I would think to, and I know to the Department of Justice, but it's still a matter of do they think they can prove their case? Because in the case of the 4th Precinct, although it was not as political as obviously as this case, but we made the decision not to try the other defendants. That hadn't gone to trial. We just dismissed the case. So that could happen as well.
But do you think that there's something that is in the mind of people who are making the decisions where they feel, for legal reasons or just sincere consternation that you can't go walking around blowing shit up, practicing a kidnapping, surveil somebody's house, and just walk away and then go get a Big Mac. I mean, to me...
You sound like Dana Nessel. Let me comment on that. I was really disheartened by her comments in the news, as well as Governor Whitmer, because they're both attorneys and they know better. It's an easy thing to blame the jury, and maybe some cases, OJ. You could blame the jury.
Well, I'm not blaming the jury. I'm just saying that if somebody was talking about shit like that with me, I would not be comfortable knowing that jokers with a lot of guns who blow shit up and who are sitting outside my front door are thinking, maybe we will, maybe we won't. That'll be for you to know, or for us to know and you to find
this
out.
Is a minority
exactly,
report,
Mark. That's a great
I use it all the time.
I know, but I actually sent that in an email to someone recently when they were asking me.
It's not
it is a minority report, and that's what this case looks like to the jury. I think you're going to catch them before they follow through with what their intent is.
Yeah,
there are a lot of people probably that have lots of thoughts of hurting people in politics.
All kinds of people,
all kinds of people.
So let me give you a scenario,
a crime.
And you tell me when the right time is to make the arrest.
Sure.
I got my goofball buddy, Terry. I just rented a van. I bought a shitload of manure, and I'm going to park it outside the courthouse in 3, 2, 1. When do you get involved in that?
That's a great question or a great example, because if they had arrested Timothy McVeigh when he was loading up the Ryder truck on his way to the Murrah Federal Building, that would be different. But if
he didn't blow up like a county courthouse before he decided to blow up a federal courthouse, at some point you either have to say, "Oh shit, I guess he was serious. My bad. Sorry." All these little kids' arms and legs falling down like rain.
I mean, here's the other thing. Like when you think of terrorism cases, it's much easier to convict the terrorists that plotted to blow up the World Trade Center originally.
Yeah, because they just didn't do a good job.
No. Because here's the difference.
I mean, they did. They tried.
No, but here's the difference.
There's no question of intent.
The difference is that
I'm gonna let you finish.
Can I finish?
That was one of the best guests of all time.
That reminds me of Ross Perot. Can I finish?
Can I finish?
Can I finish?
There.
Yeah, when were they going to break up the plot to ruin his daughter's wedding? You feds didn't pull the trigger on that.
They were late on that one too.
Lesbian.
Let him finish.
Sorry.
Have you developed Tourette syndrome?
Developed.
All right. What was the question?
You were talking.
No,
he was
when do you go
to
get Timothy McVeigh? Is there a time to go get Timothy McVeigh before he blows up the Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City?
No. I was saying that with.
Well, that was the question.
Right, and I was dodging it. No. With
somebody just parked a truckload of manure over here.
With the terrorism cases, there is a body of work by terrorists that jurors know about. Right, we know what happened in. Obviously, in 9/11, we know what happened with the USS Cole. We know what happened with all these different examples. So when a terrorist gets caught and they're on trial, it's like the jury knows, okay, we know how this story ends. But when you got a bunch of yahoos no one's ever heard of, not affiliated with anything except the Grand Wolverine Watchman organization, which I'm sure everybody was familiar with before the case.
The 3 percenters.
You don't have that. And that goes back to my original point about how you got to have a completed crime, or at least have, in the case of terrorism, examples of people doing that thing.
Right. So what you're saying is, and I don't want to suggest that anybody in the government knew that Timothy McVeigh was going to do this. I mean, I've never heard that. If it's been reported, I haven't seen that. But it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you're saying if they had grabbed McVeigh before he put that truck outside the courthouse,
you've been convicted.
They got a problem. The feds that trying to get a conviction have a problem.
If he has that loaded up in the truck and he's on the way.
Yeah, I think you can jump to the logic.
It's just further along,
that he was going
it's
to.
A degree. It's just a matter of degrees.
I mean, if they would have loaded, I guess if these Wolverine Watchmen would have loaded up their made-up bombs in a van.
Yeah. Here we go. We're going to go. What's the date? Who's going? I'm going. That's all you need.
So I guess the point is
something more. I just think that something more was missing. That's all.
Surveillance isn't enough to say. Yeah. It could just be sightseeing.
They like to do that shit. The problem is that they get their jollies.
Well, when else are you going to test out your night vision goggles?
They're bored. It's the pandemic. They're locked up. They want to do something fun. Hey, why not? Let's go surveil the bridge near the governor's vacation.
These are not guys I'm going to spend a weekend with. This is not something
you don't like doing that stuff.
Time.
Some people do. I don't get it.
I like shooting
paintball.
guns. I like
people
going
like
out to the lake. I just don't hang out with some buddies saying, let's snatch somebody and attach them to a kite.
Right. some people like feather bowling. I mean, I do. I personally do.
Well, Michael, if you like feather bowling,
well, I was just trying to talk about our fine sponsors.
Yeah, the Caju Cafe always has something great going on. It is every Monday night. In fact, is Open Blues night, Open Blues Jam, and Muscle Madness. If you like Belgian delicacies, Tuesday is Funk Night. Wednesday is karaoke. Thursday is let's get some night vision goggles. No, they're not doing that on Thursdays. But on Friday, that's karaoke. Oh, shit. Yeah. It's pretending to sing, just like these guys may have been pretending to blow up the governor. This Friday, Django File, Evan Perry, Audrey Kubat will be on stage. Saturday is Mortal Disguise, Portal of Pazuzu, Nethergate, and Where the Wolves Play. Sunday, they don't have any bands with really cool names, but it's Easter, so maybe you want to take somebody out to brunch. But for more information on the great things going on at the Caju Cafe, go to cajucafe.com. That's CADIEUXCAFE.com. Perhaps you'll see Michael there, feather bowling, or defending some people who want to kidnap me, put me in a boat.
Jesus Christ.
That's pro bono, baby.
Well, no T-shirt for you.
Oh man, the geeks have inherited the earth.
Did I do that?
What a dork.
Does him wanting to play with us again mean that he's turning into a geek, or we're turning into cool guys?
So I just can't let go of this charging question, because when I look back at the charges, weapons of mass destruction, I know that you put a bunch of pennies together and blow them up, you're going to really hurt some people. But if I was a juror, I might look at that and say,
that's not mass destruction.
That doesn't really feel like a dirty bomb.
Yeah.
Not exactly nuclear fission.
Yeah, I mean, and I think one of the jury questions was about the pennies. They wanted to go over some of that. So I wonder if some of these charges, if we're not going to see some of these charges the next time around.
Well, and to your point too about people blaming the jury, and sure, the jury, the makeup, they didn't believe it, right? But they seem like they did their work here.
Yeah.
They
deliberated for 38 hours over 5
yeah.
days. Of course they did their work. Yeah. And that's why blaming them is ridiculous. Blame the people that had the burden of proof. If it were my case, I'd blame myself. I blame myself for the 4th precinct case. It was my fault.
Yeah.
Not the jury's.
A lot of angst.
I had a juror, I never forget. I was arguing, and I made the mistake of doing a 2.5-hour argument on a 3-month trial. And I had one juror, he's a trucker. He's looking at me, and with his arms folded, and he was just like shaking his head no. I was like, "What do you do when you're arguing?"
It's a great feeling.
And I'm like, "Holy shit!" I actually put a trucker song, like a country song reference, because he liked country music. And I said, "That looks like that. This case is like that song. If I that's my story, and I'm sticking to it." That was my hook. But he was still shaking his head no. So it's a terrible feeling.
Don't play outlaw country when you're trying to convict somebody. Those guys are heroes. So
lesson learned.
Who's your geek?
Oh yeah, sorry about that. Well, this week we pitied a fool, or the geek who lashed out after Mr. T tweeted that he was still taking precautions against COVID-19. I just received my second Moderna booster vaccine, and I feel good. The 69-year-old T tweeted outside his Chevy van.
I think you just wanted to do a Mr. T impersonation. But go
I'm
ahead.
still going to wear my mask and keep my distance because the virus ain't over, fool. Grr! Well, Texas Senator Ted Cruz tweeted, bizarre. 535 members of Congress. Does he sound like he's from Texas? He really doesn't. Bizarre. 535 members of Congress can attend the State of the Union without wearing masks, but it's still not good enough for Hollywood. So you want to mess with Ms. Okay, that's fine. This isn't the first time, however, that the cruiser criticized a star for advocating vaccines. One of his previous targets was Big Bird. And if he's going to try and take this to the next level and square off against one of these people he thinks is overly cautious, might I recommend that he stick with the other big chicken, the one on Sesame Street, rather than mess with the other guy, because this week's episode is brought to you by the letter T. So, Ted Cruz, you're our Geek of the Week. Because I used to do letters on the streets. And
no, we got it.
And the number 187!
That was like Jerry Falwell with the purple Teletubby. Remember that?
Oh, yeah. Tinky Winky.
Yeah.
You can dance together all night if you've got the time.
You got your shot. Now give me mine.
I'm being sorry, but you want to be the real man? That's what he should have said to Mrs. Cruz. And then he should have said, I'd rather be with Melania because she's better looking.
Careful, man, I ain't going nowhere.
Which Ted Cruz has heard before.
Ooh.
And remember what? Remember what Clubber did to Mick?
Clubber Lang.
He killed him.
Great role. Yes.
Come on, Ted. I don't think you want any part of that. That's a shot you won't recover from. It ain't a microchip in that one, baby.
Now give me mine.
You sound nothing like him.
What?
Yeah.
Stop that jibber jabber, Mac Faha. I'll step over there.
Not even close.
Careful, man, I ain't going nowhere.
See, that's the problem. I want to be BA, but I'm more of a Murdoch. But that's the way
I told you I wasn't going away.
Okay. So last week we played Bad Lieutenant, a side project that Bernard Sumner of New Order rolled out. Great albums if you haven't checked it out. So this week we're going with Peter Hook, my favorite member of New Order, and his side project, Revenge, and their fantastic Pineapple Head. Which is also
or
how they
Pineapple
described
Face.
some of the defendants in the Whitmer case. What was it?
Pineapple Face.
Pineapple face. Well, it's a face is on a head. I was just going for the whole.
Just get it right, man.
Maybe I overcharged. I should have just gone for the face. I went for the whole damn head.
Even though I fight it, I can't hide. With all the feelings in my head and all the timings I have tried. Will anybody give me what I need? Put all my faith in God above. This time I'm falling just for you. I guess I'm hungry for that love. Peace, peace, always live in peace. We live in peace, always, always. Peace, always live in peace. We live in peace, always, always. What you knew, the awful feeling when you lie. It takes the joy out of my soul and puts the hate back in my heart. Will anybody give me what I want? Put all my faith in God on high. This time I'm working just for love. It's the only wingding that I'll try. Peace, always live in peace. We live in peace, always, always. Peace, always live in peace. We live in peace, try to go home. I live in fear of the dawn. How can I even try to go home? I can't stand living without you. Now you're gone. How can I even try to go home? I know I must be strong. How can I even try to go home? I can't stand living without you. Now you're gone. How can I even try to go home? I know I must be strong.
So I think you found the difference between what New Order is with and without Peter Hook. That melodic bass line that really carries the tune, and he's not the greatest singer, but a little deeper timbre than Bernard. But
when are they going to get back together?
Never.
You don't think so?
No, I think
There was talk about it for a while, for a very short amount of time.
I think.
And then they remembered how much they hate each other.
for some good cause or something. Yeah, I think the bad blood between Bernard and Peter is so deep that it'll never happen. And because I never really hear Bernard Sumner talk too much about his feelings. I know he wrote a memoir. I don't know if he got into that very much, but it's really tough to get hooky in an interview without saying something shitty about the other members of the band.
Well, there was a New Order doc on Showtime where that had both of them on, and yeah, you could tell not much love lost between the two.
I miss Joy Division. That was a great band.
It's uplifting.
That was my happy place when I listened to them.
Made you feel better about yourself?
I did. I'm like, look at these people are.
Well, they do have an entire division devoted to Joy, so I'm glad that synced up with
That's where I shop, the Joy Division.
Yeah, they're having discounts right now, I think, actually. It's a BOGO. So
that's a cool song. I like it.
Yeah, so we're always grateful for your suggestions for Room 7609. If you have a new wave band that had some music that didn't quite get the attention it deserved, or if you have a band that no one's ever heard of before but you think is awesome, it's fire to use, to talk like some of the kids out there who have no idea what new wave is. Just give us a shout. They think new wave is what Conan O'Brien calls his hair, but then they don't even know who Conan O'Brien is, so they're just babes. So give us a shout. You can always reach us at mlsoulofdetroit@gmail.com. You can also leave us a message at 313-288-9070. That's Butterfield 89070. And we love hearing from you all the time. In fact, listener Nicole was the one who suggested that we have Darren on the show. And Darren was kind enough to agree to join us on short notice. And I wish, now he was very generous with his time, so this is not a knock on Darren, but I wish we could have had more time with him to kick through some of these, tick through some of these conspiracy theories, because I have not seen anything that suggests the Michigan kidnapping plot had anything to do with the January 6th insurrection, but it's... I don't know. Maybe Darren.
Well, plus, because one thing happened and the other didn't, which I think was Michael's point about today in general.
Well, yeah, and the other thing is, how long was this Whitmer thing going on? Forever, and this January 6th thing really came together pretty damn.
That's true.
Quick. So, but anyways, it's always great to hear all sides. That's what this is all about, is giving everybody a chance to be heard. No donors this week. Heartbreaking. Mark knows how easy it is to donate, not because he donated. He hopes to be the beneficiaries of donations. But Mark, just for folks who may just be intimidated, can you tell them how easy it is to just shovel barrels of money at us?
Yes, open up your internets and then go to mlsoulofdetroit.com, little donate button there. Do it through PayPal. Did you ever set up the show's?
That's not as easy. Actually.
Oh, okay.
It turns out but I did order some checks, so I'm
checks.
I'm a couple
steps.
I'm a couple technologies behind on that one. So now that we've got some stuff printed,
you accept wire transfers?
Yeah, sure. Why not? We just need to get in a Swiss account. That's all. Put it right next to Putin's money. So yeah, we'd love to have your support, and please support our sponsors, of course. David Hall Financial, and Luke Nowacki with Pinnacle Wealth Strategies, both network-wide sponsors. And, of course, our own special sponsor, the Caju Cafe. Please give these guys your business. They're great folks, and you can let them know when you do that ML sent you. Or you know, if you don't really care what they think about you, you can say, Sean sent me. And they'll be like, oh, you can have a seat in the back. Sean is not with us today because he is at a press conference for the Pistons, but he will be back next week. So we look forward to the return of the House of Windsor. And grateful that Michael Bullotta came in today to share some of his legal expertise. Both sides of the courtroom now. Prosecution, now he's doing defense.
That's right.
How do
Bullottalaw.com. Bullotta law.com.
You couldn't go with wholelottalaw.com? Sort of a
go
Led
with
Zeppelin-themed law firm?
It was lottabull.com, but I think that was a little bit...
When you call Bullotta Law, you'll get a lot of bull, but he'll represent you with his full heart and soul.
But now I must go feather bowling, so I got to go.
That sounds good.
So thanks for having me.
Maybe we'll meet you. So thanks for coming in. We look forward to Sean's return next week. Mark, I think we're good, right? Anything left? We wrung every drop out of the sponge. Okay, well, the rest of the week, there's other great things to do. Put it at the top of your list, the Drew and Mike podcast every day. And, of course, Fridays, Charlie LaDuff's No BS News Hour. We appreciate your support. We hope you're subscribing to our YouTube channel. That's ML Elric. You can watch this show live or watch the replay. And, of course, if you do the full audio download, we always appreciate that. Don't forget to rate the show. Don't forget to share the show. And if you want to know what's going on, follow me on Twitter at Elric, ELRICK, or on Facebook, MLELRICK. We really appreciate you being with us. And until next week, we turn to our friend Cyrus to take us out.
Can you dig that?
Can you dig it? Can you dig it?
Members of the jury, are you all agreed upon your verdict? We are. Do you find the prisoner at the bar
Sean Quimby Windsor
guilty or not guilty of the murder of
Carlos Hypotenuse Matarez?
Guilty or not guilty? The answer to that question is the end of most mystery stories. But in
Soul of Detroit,
it is only the beginning of a series of climaxes that I defy you to guess. You'll talk about this all right, but you'll never tell the ending to your friends because you won't want to spoil their excitement and their fun.